Hello and welcome to this tutorial. We're going to be covering collections and parenting of objects to other objects. Before we get too much into it, in previous two tutorials I hadn't mentioned about the unit scale. Now this is under the scene properties, so when you click to highlight it, I normally have the unit scale set to 0.001. And that's purely because when you export to STL file for 3D printing, all the scaling in that is 1:1 for what you want. So if with this cube here, it says it's 2mm cubed, and so if I was to export that as an STL file, put that STL into a slicing software, that cube would come up as 2mm all the way around. Otherwise, if that was left at 1, see everything, the grid has changed. It's now saying that that cube is 2 meters, and yeah, I found when I started the very first time with 3D printing, that was something I needed to change. Otherwise you're forever scaling things down. But yeah, back to 2mm. In the previous tutorial I mentioned about doing a particular measurement for, I think, the spacing of the wheels or the width of the wheels, and I think I quoted 0.3mm. If you'd put that in with the unit scale still set to 1, you would have seen hardly any change, so apologies for that. Now after all that, let's cover what we're going to do. Collections. I've mentioned these briefly during the intro tutorial. These are situated on the right, and they're a way of organizing different objects into different places. As you can see, I've got two here, one called collection and another called camera and lighting. They're very handy to keep track of things, say having a collection which keeps objects that you use quite often. So if you're building a large scene and you got tables and chairs, you would have usually a collection with them stored in there ready for use to copy and paste where it's needed. And sometimes it's just items which just get in the way if you're doing anything. In this case, if I create a plane, so doing Shift A to bring up the menu, mesh, and then choose plane, it just covers the entire screen, because if we open this box up in the lower left, it's created a plane, basically like a flat sheet of paper, and it's 2 meters in size. So let's just change that to 1 centimeter, and we get something a bit more sensible. If I push 1 to go to the front, and what I'm doing is just moving that up to about there, so that it looks like it's sitting on the surface. So if I push 0 to view the camera, I'll move things around a little bit. Now with this one, if I can stay in camera mode, push tab, and I can directly, or Alt Z, X-ray mode, and I can directly alter and change this this plane. So I can press E to and the extruding from these edges. So if I push Z just to lock it up and down, and there we go. I've created a rudimentary sort of backdrop for this cube. So if I go into that, turn on lighting, and you get a nice shadow effect. It gives you a way of representing the scene. But say you're actually, if I switch back to that mode, you actually want to do some work around the cube. This plane is just going to get in the way. So what you can do is you can press M, and that will bring up a menu to move it to a particular collection. In this case, I'm going to move it to the camera and lighting collection. Now we'll still see it. All it's done is moved it on this side here. If I double click on an object in that collection, I can actually rename it. So I can call this backdrop. Now while I'm working and designing, I don't really need the camera and light, so I can just click on the little icon which looks like an eye, and it hides it from the view. And now I've decluttered my sort of view area so that I can work with this cube nice and easily. Now that is essentially collections. You can create new ones by right clicking there and choosing new collection. If you right click at the top of the tree, it'll create a new one underneath. If you select within an existing collection and you right click on new, it creates that collection inside it. So you can nest things and get almost like subfolders in it, like a file explorer. Now you can right click again and choose delete. I'll rename that one to reusable objects. There we go. Right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to create a test object that we're going to sort of play around with, and just for the rest of the example. So we're just going to use this cube actually, and we're just going to do some minor changes to it. So I've pushed tab to go into edit mode, alt Z so I can see the way everything looks. I'm going to press 2, or the number 2 from the left hand side of the keyboard. So we got that there. Press 3, and with those two faces highlighted, you can see that that's what I've got highlighted. I can press I, inset, and I can just bring that down. And all we're doing is just doing something with the shape just to make it a bit interesting. So I've pressed normal number 2 on the keyboard to select edges, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete that edge. So I press X and I will click on only edges and faces. If I clicked on vertices, it'll actually delete the 2 vertices there, which will, I mean, if I do that now to show you, that's not what I want. That's too much remove. So Control Z, bring them back, press 2. In fact, I can do it from vertices selection anyway. So I go X and I can delete only edges and faces. Since I've only got an edge, then that's fine. Then I can select those 2, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to capture the y-axis distance, and then go down to here, select the other 2, press E, Y to lock to the y-axis, and just move them along a bit. So I've extruded that edge. Now with those 2 still selected, I can click in there and do Control V, and that puts back in the coordinates, so to match that edge with that edge. And I can just hold down Shift and select those 2 other points, then press F, and that fills in that gap there. If I press A, that removes all the selected vertices. To save time, instead of just going click click, oh, sometimes it doesn't work, and click in there, what you can do is hold down Alt and click on one of the edges. So if you've got a hole in the mesh like there as well, you can use this technique to quickly select all the vertices that make up, and it fits like a loop. If you can follow the mouse around it easily without any breaks in between, then it'll find the loop and select them all. From there, then press F. Let's do it to the other side, and press F. And there we just altered this object slightly just so it looks different. Now before we go a bit further, I'm going to import the pickup truck that we were making in the previous tutorial. So we go to File, and we're going to use Append. And here is the File menu. What I'll do is you double click to go into it. Before that, you've got the drop down menu there where you can choose vertical, horizontal or thumbnails. If you've got thumbnails, it'll actually show you a nice preview of what the state of the file was in when you last saved, so what you were looking at. So if you double click to go into it, it then lets you browse inside. So I want object, and I'm going to go and assume that that's the right one. So I click Append, and there we go. You click to select it, press G to move it around, but I'm going to lock it to the X-axis and move it along. If I press 1, yeah, that's down there. So again, this one, for those of you who did the previous tutorial, this is what I ended up with on my first attempt. And I've made a few extra changes. I've sort of pulled the body out a little bit, made it angle from the side, beveled the edges, and then added sort of wheel arches on that side. Now I'm going to use both of these objects. So now say I want to alter this one, but I don't want to lose a copy. I may want to refer to this one again. So I can hold down Shift and press D, and that activates the duplicate command. I can push X and move it along. Now it's already is actually put these into reusable objects, because that was the last collection I had selected. But what I can do now is with that copy I can push M, and I can either put it in an existing one or I can say a new collection. So I can left click and I'll call this one backups. And you can see it's created it there. Now if you untick it, it completely removes it from everything. With this one you can hide it and unhide it, and if you go to render the scene, it'll actually use that, whereas if you've unticked it, it won't even use it for rendering. Now that was with using Shift D to duplicate. If I move, select that one. With this one I'm going to use Alt D, then push. See, as soon as you do Alt D or Shift D, it'll automatically go into move mode. So I'm going to push X just to move that along. Now Alt D will duplicate the object, but it keeps the same mesh as that one. If I go across to Object Data Properties, along here is the different meshes for each object. So if I click there, it still calls it cube.001, and these are the same as well. Blend will automatically put a 001, 002 after duplicate names if it finds any. If I do Shift D with that again, if I push Tab, see that's still got the mirror modifier on it from the previous tutorial. It'll only highlight, it'll only go into edit mode for that one. The same as there. But if I click on that cube where they're sharing the same mesh, they'll both go into edit mode, and what I can do is I can edit one and they'll all get edited. Anything which is sharing the same mesh here. So I'll Control Z just to take those back again. So I click there and put shared mesh. There we go. So you can see they're both there. If you find down the line that you're happy for those to be separate, you can click on the little marker there. So if I go, you can see it says 2. If I go Alt D and then X, again, it'll say this mesh is shared across 3 things. Now this, must remember that this tab here for Object Data Properties is separate from Object Properties, where that there is the name of the object. Maybe I should rename them, so sample 1, sample 2, sample 3. In a sense we could turn this into a chair. Now push A to select everything, A to deselect, press C for circle, and what it'll do, wherever you left click it'll select. If you middle click, it deselects, and when you right click it cancels out of it and keeps what you're doing. Now what I'm going to do is go G and then Z and just lower it down a little bit. Push A, deselects. A is a kind of a toggle when you're in edit mode. Right, I'm going to go C again. I'm going to do a lazy extrude. I'm not going to worry about making those edges tidy. I'm just going to push E and then Z to stretch up. There we go. If I go underneath, around there. Now let's see, I'm going to push normal keyboard 3, select that, push I, go in a little bit, push 1 on the numpad, and I'm just going to push E to go down. A to deselect. So now I've just got a rudimentary chair. Now say I want to have these pickup trucks transporting those chairs. Now obviously they're too big at the moment. Now I can either scale that one by pressing S and then using the mouse to change its scale, which is okay, so if I Control Z, or I can go into that mode, change it back to vertices, and I can go A and then push S for scale and then bring them down. I'm going to push 7 on a numpad and then G and move these over to the pickup truck. Let me just get rid of that one a second. Now with that one selected, where is that chair? Numpad 3, I'm going to zoom in, Alt Z, and that seems to be the level of the floor of the pickup truck, so I can go G, Z and just place it there. So when you go into it, you'll see that it's sitting there. Now if I want, I can actually, where that one's located, each object has a center point, which is that little dot. If I click on there, you see the pickup truck's that, and that one's there. If I capture that, Control C to capture its height on the Z axis, click on there and Control V, I can get them both to the same height. I can zoom in and then move that on there. And I'm just going to have them sitting in there randomly. Normally, if you're viewing off angle from an axis, if you push R, it'll rotate around your point of view. But if you press Z, or any of them like Y or X, it'll lock into that axis. But what I want to do is just Z, and I just want to spin that round. Maybe G, and then lock to the Y axis, move it back to there. Doesn't make it a bit random. So now we've got those chairs in there. Now this is where we move on to the part of the tutorial to talk about parenting of objects to other objects. Right now I'm wanting those to stay in the pickup truck, but if I select the pickup truck and press G to move it around, the chairs stay there. So I push escape to cancel that. Now what I can do is I can click on each of those and then click on the pickup truck, and you can see it has a different color highlight, and that signifies that's the last item to be selected. Now you can go hold down Control and press P, and then you can choose to put those objects to set the pickup truck as its parent. So I click on that one, keep its transform. Now whenever I move the Jeep about, the chairs move with it. I can still move the chairs individually. I'll do Control Z. There we go. And that is parenting objects to other objects, essentially allowing you to move things around while keeping other things sticking with them. That is this tutorial on collections and parenting. Hope you found it useful, and see you in the next one.